Hi, this is Paul Cargan here with Joseph Harris, author of Rewriting, How to Do Things with Texts, now in its second edition. And Joe has agreed to talk with me a little bit about the book for the benefit of my students who will be reading it. So Joe, thanks for sitting down with me.
Pleased to be with you.
I the first thing I want to ask you about is that you are not a disembodied author out there somewhere. You are an actual human being with a life, and you live in a place, and you do things, and you eat. Tell us just briefly about who you are as a person.
Well, good question, but let me start by saying that realization was one of the key ones that I had to make in my career. When I started out teaching and writing, I always imagined other writers sort of sitting in oak-lined studies with a glass of sherry by them as, you know, their secretary ran in with the most recent correspondence or whatever. It never occurred to me that they were people, you know, sort of catching the bus and dropping kids off at daycare and trying to find time to write in the middle of trying to find time to do all sorts of other things. So I guess my first answer to your question would be is that I'm somebody who does a bunch of things as well as write. I love writing, but I also love teaching. I'm a husband, a dad. I have two grown daughters now. One is a high school teacher. The other is a playwright and screenwriter. Have a grandson, 5 years old, that during this pandemic time, my wife and I are actually helping to look after him so his parents can go off to work. That has been a joy. I'm teaching online, which I think is worthwhile, but less fun than actually being in the same room with other people. I'm actually teaching now, although I teach at the University of Delaware. Right now, my wife and I are living in Pittsburgh, so we can help take care of our grandson. And I'm glad that works. It's also a little bit odd. I don't know how much of a biography you would like, but I grew up in an Irish Catholic home in the city of Philadelphia. My dad was a truck driver. My mom was a part-time secretary, went to parochial schools, and then went to an extraordinarily good high school, LaSalle College High, run by the Christian Brothers, who, rather than the sort of local parish high school. And that was a wonderful moment in my life. It showed me worlds that I did not know existed and let me think beyond the block that I was living on. And then from LaSalle, I went to Haverford College, a small Quaker college right outside of Philadelphia, not very far from my parents' house, but an entire world away at the same time. And that opened up yet other a world of ideas is what I would say, a world of books, of movies, of music that I became just really passionate about and have continued to be passionate about, along with things like dogs, chess, baseball, and so on.
You have dogs?
Oh yeah, we're actually down to one now. Very sadly, we had two older dogs. We lost two of them this year. So it actually feels a little lonely with just one dog, but he is a pit bull mix named Abe because he came to our house on Lincoln's birthday.
Oh. So this book is a book about how to use sources. If we were just going to literally describe it in academic writing, you got to cite sources, and this is how to do it. But it strikes me, and I guess this is why I love this book so much, and I teach it whenever I can. And it was really helpful to me as a student when it first came out, and I was just entering grad school, even though I think it's written for broader, it's not written for grad students necessarily, but it was very helpful. But throughout the whole book, as I'm reading, I'm not just getting about how to use sources. There's like a book behind the book that kind of seeps through. An example might be, oh, I had this page marked, and then I might have I've lost my page here, but oh, here we go. You say on page 26, so here in chapter 1, you're talking about using sources, but you say intellectual writers usually work not with simple antitheses, either X or not X, but with positive opposing terms, that is, with words and values that don't contradict each other, yet still exist in some real and ongoing tension. I'm just kind of pulling a random quote out of the book as an example of, like, we're talking about something more than just how to cite sources. We're talking, there's a whole set of assumptions about what it is we're doing. Why would we even want to write a kind of essay in which we're citing sources? So I wonder if you might, what are some of the assumptions about why we're doing the kind of writing that this book helps us do?
Well, first of all, I love the way you read the book, and I intentionally wrote it so that grad students would read it, undergraduates would read it, high school teachers and their students would read it, other scholars were reading it. That was the challenge I set for myself in writing this particular book, was not to narrow the audience too much, to see if I could talk about writing and what I valued about it. In ways that spoke to a fairly broad group of people. So it's really nice to hear that. And you're also right. I mean, writing is a part of my life. And so when I talk about writing, I'm going to be bringing my life to it as well. And I think the key thing for me is the notion of being in a conversation with other people. And so why do we cite other sources? Because we want to think about how other artists and writers can influence what we have to say. Not so much that we want to debate them and beat them in some way, but that we want to have a conversation where both of us come out knowing a little more than we did before. And so it's that sense of an ongoing conversation, keeping the ball moving, not being locked so much into in a contest, but a kind of dance that drives a lot of my work, my teaching and my writing, and drove a lot of that book. I do think, actually, you know, if you want me to argue a little bit with people, I would want to argue in some sense against the emphasis on argument in a lot of academic work. I don't think that that's what we do, at least at our best, that what we do instead is to kind of say, yes, but, rather than no, you're wrong, right? That we're trying to think ahead, move the conversation forward, but we're not simply trying to score points. Because if you do that, it strikes me as pretty much a zero-sum game. I felt like I had sat in a lot of classrooms and a lot of faculty meetings where one side won and one side lost, but that was all that happened. Nobody really walked out of the room that much smarter. You just had, you know, a W or an L next to your pitching record. And that was not the kind of work I wanted to be involved with. I wanted to be involved with work that everybody in the room, in a sense, would profit from. And that's why you read the passage about positive opposing terms. I hope I said this in the book. I can't remember, but I know where I got that phrase. It's from a critic and a writer that I admire very much named Raymond Williams. And I'm pretty sure that I stumbled upon that particular phrase in a book he wrote called Keywords. And the keyword he was discussing was community. And what he points out and that was a kind of aha moment for me, was that community and individual are not antitheses, right? One is not, community is not good and individuals are bad, or vice versa. They're both good things, and yet they're in real tension. You can't always, have all of the values of each. You have to make decisions, and some things about valuing community impinge upon individualism, and vice versa. So that's how they're sort of positive opposing terms rather than simple negative terms in competition. And that's been sometimes I think I think a little bit too much in bumper stickers, but positive opposing terms is one of those bumper stickers for me. It helps organize a lot of what I want to do.
So the kind of the book behind the book then is this vision of life where dialogue matters, where engaging with ideas matters, with considering new things and coming up with new perspectives, that these are all a worthwhile way to live. And then therefore that's what we practice in our writing.
Yeah, and actually, as I hear you say that, and you put it very eloquently, but another thing that I've always chafed against a little bit is I've spent most of my career teaching first year writing. I teach other courses, but that's really been the center of it. And it seems to me that first year writing has been limited by a kind of pragmatic or instrumentalist view of its function, right? That teachers worry about preparing their students to do work for somebody else at some later point in their career. And this particularly becomes an anxiety when they think about standard English and correctness and so on, right? If I don't fix this mistake now, it's going to hurt this person, when some meaner teacher gets hold of him. I think it's what lies underneath a lot of these worries. And I think that's just a kind of certainly limiting and maybe almost destructive way to approach it. That what I want to do is to work with a group of students for 14 or 15 weeks and see what we can do then for its own sake, to have a conversation about books and ideas that at the end of it, people say, wow, I'm really glad I was there for that conversation, not, oh, now I will do fine in intermediate history when I'm asked to write an essay exam. So yeah, it's valuing that kind of work as an end in itself and not just a means to something else is very important to me.
I love that. Throughout the book, you just mentioned the book keywords, and throughout the book, you do draw attention to some of your own keywords, like interest. The opening sentence of the book says is you want to help us make interesting use of the sources we cite. And then you, at the end of the introduction, kind of unpack here the layers of the word interest. You kind of examine just kind of an ordinary word, interest or interesting, and you're like, there's actually a lot going on here.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were going to do that to your own, to add a keyword or pull out a keyword that I don't recall you bringing that kind of attention to, but I want to, I would say that the central keyword of this book is use. So you want us to help us make interesting use of the sources we use or cite. And throughout, every time when you are talking about disagreeing with a source or agreeing with a source, you always say, that's not the point. You want to then use that agreement or disagreement to get somewhere. And what I love so much about that word use, it's just very practical. Like it implies we're doing something. We're not just saying something. We're pursuing a project. We're building something. We're making something. We're doing something. And to do the thing, whatever we're doing, we need to use stuff to help with that. So what do you think about my reading of that word? Is that this key to what's going on here?
Oh, for sure. And it's not in the title, but the term use is almost in the subtitle, right? Which is how to do things with text, right? The notion is to look at writing not so much or not only for how it sounds or what it says, but what the writer is trying to accomplish in some way, what they're trying to get done. And I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to, I'm going to raise a slight problem for myself here, which I'm not sure I'm going to be able to quickly fix. But the last thing I said before this was that I didn't like instrumentalist views of writing. And so I do like the idea of using text, but again, it's not a use directed towards a kind of exchange value, getting a better grade, persuading more people to visit your blog kind of thing or whatever. The use is actually in the turning the work of someone else into ideas of your own, right? That the use is at the level of an interesting concept of being engaging as a writer. Yeah, let me stop there and agree with you that I think that's a key word of mine as well.
So I just one or two more questions. Behind all of this is this idea that it's good to be that being an intellectual or doing intellectual work is good, and this is not a universally held cultural value in our time and place in the world. So why I don't even want to say be an intellectual, but why do intellectual work? Why should just the typical student who shows up to a class, maybe because they're interested, maybe because they have to, but why should they care to do intellectual work in the first place?
It's a good question, and I have, I think, a too easy answer, which is to say because there's a joy and a pleasure in it, but that can be followed by the question of what do you mean? I hate school. What is joyful about that? And for that reason, I think one of the things I try to do as a teacher, and I don't know if I can claim to do it as a writer, but is to help people become aware of what their intellectual interest might already be, right? I had a grandfather who taught me how to play chess, and that was a big part of his intellectual life, thinking through the problems on the board. And you don't play chess to make money. You play it again for the sort of joy that it brings you. And I think that was a similar sort of pleasure that actually I don't play as well as he did, but I enjoy playing chess as well. But I think I get a similar pleasure out of writing, out of having a sense of constructing something that hangs together in a way that is satisfying for me. And I think that students have to figure out what their version of that is. So one of the things I don't want to do is to say, you need to write an essay that follows a particular sort of form and does a certain kind of work and even sometimes seems to say a certain kind of thing. I hate writing that says, prove to me that you've read this book, or I think even in a lot of classes, it's, show me that you can think in certain ways, that you're critical of some people and less critical of others, and so on. And that really drives me crazy. What I want to try to get students to do is to write something that they can explain to me why it looks and sounds the way it does, why it's built the way that they've built it, that they have a reason for beginning the piece in a certain way and developing it in another, and where they're trying to get to in the end, that they figured out rather than has been preordained for them by some sort of formula or textbook. And I think if you can get people invested in writing at that level, it actually starts to become that sort of, hard fun that most good things in life involve. It takes some study to play chess well. It takes some real effort and concentration to learn how to, bat in baseball or to play tennis reasonably well or to draw or whatever. That all of these things that we think of as bringing pleasure require a kind of concentration work to get there. And I think that's much the same thing with writing and with intellectual work. I do, I think there are, I'll go out on a limb here. It's January 19th, a new president's going to be inaugurated tomorrow. I do think that a side effect of that work is that learning how to pay attention to what other people are saying and imagining that they are usually saying it for, well-intentioned reasons, and trying to figure out what those reasons were and trying to figure out a way to respond them that may not agree, but nonetheless doesn't simply reject or dismiss them. I think that's good for, civil society and democracy as well. But I actually want to, and I think some teachers, that becomes their first goal, right? How do I create a more sort of critical democracy? And again, while I don't disagree with that, I generally want to work through it by saying, how can I engage people, students, in having an investment in their work and thus having an investment in listening to what other people have to say. And I have the hope that good things will come out of that on not only an individual, but a more collective level as well.
I hope so.
Rambling response to why I do this.
The last thing that I want to ask you is, do you have anything else you'd like to add or to say to folks who are about to read your book?
Well, I'll tell you a couple of responses that I've gotten to the book that I have found really appealing, but I think that these were readers that sort of caught what I was trying to do. One student, and he was actually kind of complaining a little bit, said to me, the problem with this book is that most of the books I read for school, you can just really kind of look at the beginning of the chapter and the end and skim over it and you'll have it down. He said, this book you have to read every damn sentence. And I really like that. I tried to write a book where you needed to read every sentence and hopefully you would want to read most of them. And the other comment that really I thought was endearing, because was somebody who said, what I like about this book is that I like the sense that, you're somebody I could go out and play a round of golf with. And I thought that was funny because I've never played a round of golf in my life. I mean, I have no, or been to a country club or whatever. And in some sense, it's not me at all, but it was this reader's version of, an approachable person, someone he could have a conversation with. And so I was very pleased with that too. So, I mean, I would hope that that readers of the book would sort of read it slow and whole, take from it what they can, and look to be entering a conversation rather than to be storing up information. Actually, let me say one last thing. In my book, there are a lot of terms that I use, like countering and forwarding and taking an approach and so on. And I've been in conversation with some people where they said, well, what I'm really trying to do here is, forward in the sense of illustrating. Well, maybe it's not really illustrating so much as authorize, or I'm not sure that I have this exactly right. And what I always say is, I don't care. The point is, not for people to have a list of terms and say, and then, notes by them and say, you illustrate when you do this, you authorize when you do this other thing, but to encourage readers to think about what they're trying to do with the text they read and watch and listen to as they write about them. If you're doing that, you're doing the kind of work that I hope for. And in fact, if you're inventing your own terms rather than using mine, good for you, go for it.
I love it. Thank you
Great.
so much.
It's always fun to talk about this stuff. I'm really so happy you invited me to do it.
So am I.
Okay. I'll look forward to watching it.
Okay. So long.
All right. See ya. Bye-bye.